You're listening to Scientific Giants Who Changed Our Understanding of the World We Live in. Each episode stands beside one mind and follows a thread of curiosity until it ties to the world we inhabit. Today we travel to Alexandria, to a classroom held together by chalk, voice, and a woman's authority, Hypatia of Alexandria. This hour is not a museum tour. It is a walk through a city where mathematics meets politics at a sharp corner, where instruments for measuring the heavens are built in a house that also receives petitioners from City Hall, where a teacher insists on clear definitions while mobs learn a different grammar in the street. Begin with the place, because Alexandria is not scenery, it is a method. The city leans against the Mediterranean on a grid the Ptolemies laid down with a ruler's appetite for straight lines. A long causeway, the heptastadion, stitches the island of Pharos to the mainland, turning harbors into instruments for directing ships and taxes. The lighthouse throws its assurance across the water. Colonnades guide pedestrians like lines on a proof. Not far from the Serapeum, already scarred by riots and imperial decrees years before Hypatia's death, the rubble of the temple's enclosures still carries the afterimage of scrolls. The great libraries had been eroding for centuries, yes, but the habit of exactness they once sheltered persists in classrooms and workshops, in the rhythm of scribes, in the calculation of tables, in instruments that whisper the city's pride in measurability. Alexandria is a geometry you can live in. Invite Hypatia into that frame. Her father, Phaon of Alexandria, is a mathematician and commentator, a craftsman of texts. His name appears on careful editions of Euclid's Elements, on commentaries that shepherd readers through the arguments of Ptolemy's Almagest, on astronomical tables meant to put the heavens' cycles into the hands of students who need numbers more than they need poetry. If you want to know what kind of home makes a Hypatia, imagine a place where diagrams are dinner conversation, where an instrument left on a table is as likely to be a half-finished astrolabe as a bowl, where the difference between clear and sloppy isn't a matter of taste, but the difference between truth and error. Imagine a father who understands that the most radical thing you can give a daughter is the expectation that her mind belongs in public. We know less about her early years than we wish. Ancient lives come to us full of gaps, and the gaps tempt a storyteller to decorate. Resist the temptation and stay close to what is secure. She becomes a teacher of mathematics and philosophy. She heads a school in the city. She advises the civic leadership. She writes commentaries on difficult works, Diophantus's Arithmetica, Apollonius's Conics, Ptolemy's astronomical tables, and she works with instruments. If we cannot always quote her words, we can overhear her through her students, and we can track her by the kinds of problems that recur in the letters they send. The shape of her mind is legible in the shape of her classroom, a place where precise language and physical devices negotiate a shared meaning. Picture the room as her students might. Benches, a slate or wax tablet warm in the palm, a teacher in a philosopher's cloak, unhurried, apparently unafraid. Theorems do not arrive as pronouncements from a mountaintop. They are coaxed into being by questions. She begins with a figure, say a conic section, a clean ellipse born when a plane slopes through a cone. She asks what properties of the figure are indifferent to the exact angle of that cut, what remains when you tilt the plane or change the scale. You can feel in that question the discipline of her culture. Search for invariance. If you understand what survives transformation, you understand something the world will not steal with noise. Selenius of Cyrene, one of those students, writes to her when he is far away holding a bishop's staff. His letters are our lucky window. He asks for advice. He asks for instruments. He praises her as mother, sister, teacher, benefactor, and the quartet of roles tells you how she held a community together. He asks her to arrange the construction of a hydroscope, what we would call a hydrometer, an instrument for measuring the density of liquids. He speaks of astrolabes and of how an instrument can be both a diagram and a discipline. Brass teaching you what a projection is, wood teaching you what a radius feels like, the hand teaching the mind how an angle lives in a hinge. Through Selenius, you can watch Hypatia's classroom spill into laboratories that do not yet have that name. Because Alexandria invites contraries to argue within earshot, Hypatia lives at a seam, not only between mathematics and instrument, but between philosophy and public life. She advises Orestes, the Roman prefect who tries to govern a city of overlapping sovereignties, imperial command and ecclesiastical power, merchant influence, and popular fury. She speaks in council halls as well as in classrooms. When petitioners come to the prefect, they sometimes leave by way of her door. In her chariot, yes, the image survives, the woman philosopher moving through the city, with a visibility that makes some proud and some anxious. She travels as a public mind, someone whose authority runs on reason rather than rank. That visibility will matter, for good and then for harm. What does she teach when the text is not geometry? Philosophy, but not as vague consolation. The Neoplatonism of her school is not a closed world of emanations and mystical ladders. It is the discipline of ordering the soul by ordering the mind. The hierarchy that tradition describes, one, intellect, soul, body, is not an excuse to ignore the world, but a way to think about what should rule in a human life. She does not set the mathematical and the philosophical apart. A mind that can hold the definition of an ellipse steady, while the diagram shifts, is a mind that can hold a civic principle steady, while events buffet it in the forum. The habit of proof becomes a habit of governance. The temptation when telling her story is to rush to the end, because the end is violent and violence is dramatic. Restrain the rush. Begin instead with a smaller violence she refuses to accept, the violence of muddled texts. Much of what we call Greek science and mathematics survived because people like Hypatia copied, corrected, and commented. Her father's edition of Euclid became for centuries the Euclid that students read. Hypatia's commentaries are a kind of engineering. She takes a difficult work, say Diophantus's Arithmetic of the Unknown, and she designs a bridge by which a tired mind can cross from ignorance to understanding without falling into the river of confusion. She clarifies definitions, she chooses examples that bite, she smooths notations so that a student's hand and eye arrive at the same place as the author's. It is not glamorous, but it is how a culture maintains an exact science across generations. Clarifying a classic is a way of thinking with it. When you annotate Apollonius, you do more than restate his propositions. You decide what to emphasize. Do you dwell on eccentricity as a measure of deviation from circularity? Do you linger on the ways conics behave under projection? Do you front-load properties that will be useful in computing positions of wandering stars? The choices light paths for later readers. A commentary can be the way a tradition chooses its future. Hypatia's choices, the insistence on clear definition, the patience with hard examples, the insistence that a model is an instrument rather than a creed, become part of the living body of practice. In a city where scrolls have burned and will burn again, a mind that can reconstruct a proof is a firebreak. To feel how her classroom breathes, step into a scene where words and brass meet. On a low table, an astrolabe lies open, a stack of plates each engraved with a projection of the celestial sphere for a particular latitude. A rete, a cut-out map of the brighter stars, floats above, pivoting around a stylus that stands in for the Earth's axis. The instrument is a compact heaven. A student slides a plate into place, sets the rete to the date, and sights a star along an alidade on the instrument's back. The angle you read becomes the time you keep. The geometry you memorized becomes a city's ablutions and appointments. Hypatia is not only teaching astronomy, she is teaching what it means for a model to work. The plane can stand for the sphere can fit inside a calendar, a calculation can end in bread. There is a straight line from that table to her city's streets, where measurements decide disputes, how much grain is owed, how much tax is fair, whether a canal carries enough water, whether a wall's foundation lies true. Alexandria lives by exactness, the way a ship lives by a compass. When exactness fails, the city lurches. In her lifetime, the lurching increases. The long, messy work of Christianization changes the city's daily grammar. Rituals refocus. Hierarchies rearrange. Zeal hardens. None of this is reducible to a slogan about science and religion. Alexandria is not that simple, but street power and church power and imperial power start to grind against each other with more heat than the city can safely conduct. In such a climate, public minds become lightning rods. To walk this edge carefully, Listen to a historian close in time. Socrates Scholasticus, a churchman writing in Constantinople, tells the story with a sadness that does not excuse the killers. In his account, some of Cyril of Alexandria's followers believed that Hypatia kept Orestes from reconciling with the bishop. She became a symbol, then a target, because symbols are easier to attack than problems. One day, in the spring of 415, a group led by a church officer named Peter seized her in the street, dragged her into the Caesareum, a church raised on old imperial foundations, killed her with fragments of pottery or roof tiles, and burned what remained. The details vary in later retellings. The motive never improves. A city that prided itself on exactness stumbled into a murder performed with the instruments of demolition. The body vanished into smoke, but bodies of thought do not. Her students kept writing. They carried her insistence on clarity into monasteries and courts. Clerics who studied with her preached sermons. Administrators who studied with her evaluated claims with the dryness of a geometer. The tradition she tended crossed languages. In the next centuries, as Arabic became a language of science and government, from the eastern Mediterranean to Iberia, the works she polished and taught traveled in new translations, meeting new problems and new instruments. The habit she trained, treat a model as an instrument, teach the instrument by building it in brass, correct the brass by returning to first principles, proved easy to translate. What did she believe about the cosmos? Likely what the curriculum of her time taught, that the Earth stands at the center of nested spheres, that planets defer to eccentrics and epicycles, whose careful tuning makes retrograde loops into orderly illusions. She would not have taken that model as a metaphysical prison. She would have taught it as the best available instrument for calculating appearances. That separation, model as instrument, not dogma, is one of her gifts. When later centuries treat Ptolemy as a rival to Copernicus, they miss the quiet courage of teachers like Hypatia, who kept astronomy honest by refusing to worship Askina. The sky is not a creed, it is a data set. There is a quieter piece of her legacy that matters because it is unglamorous. She graded, she corrected, she sent a student back to a line of Euclid because the step from proposition to corollary was too fast. She insisted that when you compute with fractions, you mark your remainders clearly. She told a future bishop that you cannot repair a misunderstanding about an orbit by flare of authority. She insisted that administration of a school, of a city, takes the same virtue as computation. Do not hide your steps. Say what you assume. Trace causes without flattering the powerful. It is not the kind of work that draws monuments, but it is the work that keeps institutions from lying to themselves. Because her death is on every summary, take a minute to examine what her life shows that the deaf can hide. The first is that scientific work is institutional work. There are no laboratories in late antique Alexandria the way we mean the word, but there are classrooms, workshops, scriptoria, observatories of the courtyard kind, and networks of letters. Theon's household is an institution. The prefect's circle is an institution. The church, with its deacons and readers and hospitals and almoners, is a dense cluster of institutions. Knowledge moves along these channels like water in clay pipes, and the pipes crack when politics overload them. Hypatia's presence at the joints, between school and state, instrument and text, made knowledge flow more evenly. When she's removed, pressure spikes, and you can hear the complaints of bursting. The second is that commentary. The lowest rank in some modern minds is invention in slow motion. When you remove a contradiction in a classic text, you are not only cleaning a window, you are changing the view. When you propose a better notation, you are not simply being tidy, you are altering what a student can imagine. When you write a table that lets an overworked official compute the date of Easter without tripping on lunar cycles, you are not merely helping a clerk. You are teaching an empire to align ritual with the sky. Hypatia's work on astronomical tables and on the problems Diophantus loved is the work by which a civilization keeps mathematics from becoming a museum exhibit. The third is that instrument making is applied metaphysics. A plain astrolabe assumes that the celestial sphere can be projected onto a flat surface without losing the relationships that matter for timekeeping and navigation. That is a claim about what structure survives transformation. The hydrometer assumes that density can be measured by the height at which a weighted float rides in a liquid. That is a claim about the honesty of buoyancy. A city saturated with such instruments becomes a school for the senses. You learn that the world has lawful regularities, and you learn how to use them without worshiping them. Hypatia's classroom is a factory for that confidence. Her gender has made her a symbol more than once. A warning in polemics, a banner in movements for broader access to science. Symbols flatten. Let the details breathe. She neither ran the great library, as some 19th century fantasies imagined, nor was she the last light before a long darkness. There were libraries after her, schools after her, arguments after her. What makes her singular is not lastness, but a style. Openness to students who did not share her religion. Seriousness without bitterness. Courage without exhibition. A conviction that mathematics is not a retreat from the world, but a training for entering it carefully. The proof is not that she died. The proof is that so many who learned from her refused, after her death, to abandon the steadiness she taught. That public quality is why her end felt like a referendum on a city's soul. In the weeks before her murder, tensions between Orestes and Cyril grew hot. Crowds formed, were dispersed, reformed. A lector named Ammonius attacked Orestes with a stone and was arrested. Rhetoric hardened around whether the prefect or the bishop would set the city's tone. People looked for the person to blame for delay or compromise. Hypatia, a woman of authority whose counsel was known to shape the prefect's decisions, became the simplest accusation. She was the obstacle, the reason reconciliation stalled. Blame, like water, runs downhill. It flowed toward the person who could not answer with troops. Walk again through the classroom one last time and notice the small economies of attention by which a teacher enlarges the world. She brings a student who has never seen a conic section to the moment when an orange slice surprises them into understanding that an ellipse is hidden in fruit. She stands at a window at dusk with another student and points out how Venus's light softens and sharpens with altitude, then traces how an epicycle mimics that behavior on paper. She sits with a clerk who cannot make a tax table reconcile and finds the missing assumption, not in malice, but in a miscopied unit. Her authority is not a halo. It is a record of days spent rescuing problems from vagueness. What does an episode make of such a life? It makes an argument that the chain of ideas is only as strong as the classrooms that teach people to repair links. Archimedes showed us the power of a proof that can walk out of a page and lift a ship. Hypatia shows us the power of pedagogy that can survive a riot because it has already survived 1,000 confusions. Her work does not glitter like a new theory. It shines with the low, constant light of institutions that teach us how to think in public. When later scholars, pagan, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, compute with cleaner tables, read with clearer commentaries, and teach with kinder patience, they are walking in lines she chalked. Let me draw one more line. Because the chronology of this series is also a set of bridges across cultures. While Hypatia teaches in Alexandria, in India mathematicians are refining sine tables and thinking about series. In China, scholars will soon measure pi with astonishing precision. In the centuries after her death, Arabic-speaking scholars in Baghdad, Damascus, and Cordoba will translate, critique, and extend the Greek mathematical corpus, folding it into a new language of algebra and astronomical instrumentation. The habit of commentary that Hypatia honed meets the habit of systematic computation that will come with algebraic symbolism. The conversation lengthens, the vocabulary grows, the ethos, the refusal to flatter authority when the numbers disagree, survives. If you need something that feels like a single artifact to hold in your hand after this hour, imagine an astrolabe with a small scratch on the reed where a teacher's finger slipped. The scratch is a flaw that proves the instrument is not a drawing in a book, but brass made by hammer and file. It sits as happily in a church treasury as in a mathematician's cabinet. It tells time for prayer and for observation. It connects the curve of the ecliptic to the patch of sky above a courtyard where a class gathers. It is a piece of technology and a piece of pedagogy at once, and if you listen to it long enough, it speaks Hypatia's creed. A model works not because a famous name blessed it, but because you can use it well and teach it to someone else. We end with the image the city would rather forget. The street, the seizure, the dragging into the Caesareum, the crude tools of murder, the smoke. The historian's duty is not to repeat the blow, but to count what was lost. A school's center of gravity, a community symbol that authority could be earned by reason, a rare and convincing proof that a woman could stand at the front of a room of powerful men and ask them to do honest work with their minds. The story is not an excuse to divide the world into villains and heroes who map neatly onto confessions. It is a warning about what happens when fear recruits piety and impatience borrows the language of righteousness. Kill a teacher, and you do not silence her. You scatter her into the work of her students, where she becomes harder to catch. And yet we are here, which means that her line of work endured. The titles she glossed, the habits she taught, the instruments she built and specified, all became part of the bloodstream of later science. A mathematics that takes pride in exact definition and clean inference, an astronomy that is humble about models and bold about measurement, a politics that at its best brings its disputes to public procedures. These are postures that can be taught, practiced, and renewed. Her life is a case study for the proposition that the health of a city is measured by how it treats those who ask it to be precise about what it claims, what it owes, and what it worships. You have been listening to Scientific Giants who changed our understanding of the world we live in. Today we stood in Alexandria and learned how a classroom can be a civilizing instrument, and how a teacher named Hypatia held together texts, tools, and a city's better hopes until the day the city let go. In our next episode, we travel east in time and geography to sit with Aryabhata, who will take the sky apart with numbers and put it back together as cycles you can calculate. Until then, thank you for your attention and your time. This episode was written as a continuous story for the ear. If it moved you, bring a friend along next time. Until our next hour together, keep an eye on the instruments and definitions you lean on. They are closer than they look.